According to Noe and Rubin, citizens of Koyame were warned for years after the 1974 event to stay away from this area due to high levels of radiation. What exactly happened here?
I'm going to sweep slowly.
Ronnie tests for radioactivity in the pit using a Geiger counter. The Geiger counter measures the number of radioactive particles being emitted by a sample in counts per minute, or CPM.
Just about 15 CPMs.
The Earth itself emits a background radiation of approximately 15 CPM.
No sign of any radioactivity. Looks like we're radioactive dead. In other words, it's just normal. Oh, hold on a second.
I heard something.
Hang on. That increased rapidly. Hang on.
Wow.
The radiation level jumped to over 100 counts per minute, 8 times the normal level, indicating radioactive material may have been in this immediate vicinity.
Well, I still have a lot of questions about what this hole might be, but I have to admit it's unusual.
When you come upon a site that potentially contains the wreckage of a plane that crashed with a UFO that the military scrubbed clean, and yet on the site are potentially little pieces of forensic evidence that may reveal substances other than simply what would have been on that plane. So for us, I'm thrilled. This is a major find.
The plane debris and the radioactive samples taken from the mysterious pit in the Chihuahuan Desert are sent to the lab to test for trace evidence of UFOs.
We do know that something happened there.
Will testing in the lab finally help solve the case of Mexico's Roswell? The team has gathered samples from a reported UFO crash site near Koyame, Mexico.
What is this?
They are now headed back to the laboratories at Capco Analysis Systems in Ventura, California.
So the team had collected 4 samples, one of which is a control sample, and the other 3 are closer to this mysterious hole. We're going to test these samples for a variety of known compounds, organic and semi-volatiles.
The team meets Alan Repedy, an analysis technician who ran a number of tests on samples gathered near the reported burial site.
When we were at Koyame out in the desert, we took a series of samples radiating out from what we think was the sign of the explosion. I know you ran some tests on those. What did you find out?
The organic side basically implied that analysis using gas chromatography, mass spectroscopy instrument, the purpose being to identify all the semi-volatile compounds potentially present in those samples.
Alan is testing 4 samples collected from different distances around the mysterious pit near Koyame. The sample areas start at the furthest distance from the center point. Sample A is the control, and sample D was taken from inside the hole itself. Alan is scanning for the presence of VOCs, volatile organic compounds. VOCs are defined by the Environmental Protection Agency as chemical compounds that easily vaporize into the atmosphere. These include methane, formaldehyde, and many common household chemicals. Identifying the VOCs will help to define the chemical makeup of the sample.
In your sample, sample A and sample B are completely clean samples. There's really nothing in it. However, in the other 2, C and D, we found a slight trace of hydrocarbons, basically, petroleum products, which we kind of define, looking at the chromatogram, as motor oil. Again, it's not too much, but enough to show us some positive, some hits.
Which is funny because where that sample came from, C and D, they were getting closer to the actual mine shaft where, as the story goes, the United States Army blew up some debris right around that mine shaft. We found a few petroleum containers there.
The soil samples from Koyame did have some kind of semi-volatile compound in them. Although we can't draw specific conclusions, we do know that something happened there that may have involved some kind of explosion or incendiary process. All of this supports the possibility that there may have been some sort of military activity there and therefore some sort of military cover-up.
Almost as though there was petroleum stored in there which either reached out and went to the top or it was actually exploded, and we don't know. There is a link here between the two cases, the crash at Koyami and what really happened in the village of Halitla. So what do the tests show, Jeff?
Well, the test shows the petroleum or a benzene substance was more in concentration in a specific area, which was the D sample.
D. The hole had the highest concentration, right, of petroleum-based products. In the hole itself, which is what struck me, was that the soil itself was basically dark. It's almost as though something in the hole threw something dark into the soil. And so the closer to the top, the lighter the soil became.
You know, it sounds like perhaps an explosion.
That's what it looked like to me.
Which may have involved some volatiles or semi-volatiles. When we measured, we detect some very trace amounts there. May have done something thermally to the soil or added some chemical composition to the soil as it threw the soil out, which would be consistent with the idea that what it had thrown settled on the top of the surface away from the hole, but in the hole it could have been driven into the walls of the hole.
Okay, so I think we can debate Koyami ad infinitum until we get more information. We know there's smoke, we need to find the fire. Let's turn our attention to Halitla, because here's a case where we actually have a current case, right? It was April 2007. We were able to get a minute sample of the ash that was the residue from this fireball.
Why couldn't we bring more sample? Why do we have just a tiny amount?
There were large amounts of samples that the villagers themselves collected. The police came in and confiscated the whole mess of it, except for a very small amount. Now that we were able to get into this country.
The fact that the Mexican authorities confiscated all these samples, what does that mean?
Now you're coming over to my side of the table. What you've got is, one, why would the Mexican authorities make it such a high priority to roll in immediately, take the soil and go? Why were we followed by police and military as we went to the location? We have evidence of something.
From collecting ash from the reported Halitla crash of 2007 to finding a darkened earth area near Mexico's Roswell, the team has gained insight into one of the world's most active regions for UFO reports. And although the samples proved inconclusive, the number of sightings and the government's response to these events shows there may be more going on in Mexico than the public is allowed to know.